asked about Hitler's attitude to the church, which was indeed very conflicted, and though not a secular one, the desire to replace religion with a Nordic, Aryan, race-based paganism may be many things, but it's not secular. I was talking about the church's attitude to fascism and National Socialism, and that's what disgraces Christianity. They had to know, if you're right, Dinesh, they had to know that the ultimate aim of National Socialism was to depose their church. They didn't stop them groveling to it and sharing with it in the two main pillars of its propaganda, anti-Semitism and hatred of Marxism. Now, if you want me to accept responsibility for the Khmer Rouge, because I don't believe in God, you're not going to get me to do it, okay? And there's no one in this room who would think that was a fair indictment. If I say I don't believe in God, I do not become responsible for the crimes of Pol Pot, by definition. If I had published an article saying that Khmer Rouge were misunderstood agricultural reformers, as I do have some friends on the left who I would have to say, remain my friends, did, then I would have to feel a twinge about the crimes of the Khmer Rouge, but not otherwise. And if you think that North Korea, where I've been, is a secular state, you overlook the fact that it is based upon the worship of a dead man whose son is his reincarnation. It's one short of a trinity. It's the most perfectly religious state I've ever seen. And if you don't realize there's a connection between Stalinism and the pre-existing cult of the Tsar, a supreme head of the state who was also head of a church and considered to have supernatural properties, then you haven't done much work in cultural studies. And if I say, I don't think that God created the universe, or me, I don't become responsible for the Gulag. And is there anyone here who can supply the middle term to the syllogism that would suggest that I do? Quite plainly not. In order for your charge to work, you would have to point to a society or a state that adopted as its ruling precepts the ideas of Lucretius and Democritus and Epicurus and Galileo and Spinoza and Jefferson and Voltaire and Einstein and Richard Dawkins and so on, and then fell into slavery, backwardness, famine, and the rest of it. And you won't be able to find such a society, and you won't be able to have a proper comparison or a fair level playing field in that way. Actually, the nearest there is to such a society is the great republic in which we are this evening met, the only country in the world that ever has written itself a secular constitution, and much of whose glory is precisely for that reason. Now, I'm sorry to say that the same thing is true of slavery. It was essential, of course, that there be Christian anti-slavery movements, and I don't say that there weren't, and Christian anti-slavery activists, because theirs was the responsibility. The warrant for slavery was biblical to begin with. The warrant for slavery was found in the Bible and preached by the churches. The motto of the Confederacy, when they declared they'd rather have a war than give up the peculiar institution, was Deo Vindice, God on our side, God with us, God will vindicate us. For every Christian who was an anti-slavery activist, there were millions and millions of Christians who did not just passively but actively supported the institution, whereas the main founders of the American Anti-Slavery Society, men like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine, had no God. So your point, I'm sorry to say, falls.
Well, that certainly isn't the atheist position. The atheist says that the universe is explicable without any supernatural assumptions. The universe gives you no reason to think, nor does anything else in nature give you any reason to think there's a supernatural dimension. It doesn't prove the non-existence of God, because that can't be proven.
The Christian position...
But the proof that there is something that's been attempted by some extremely intelligent people, not exempting my friend and comrade, but there's no satisfactory proof has ever been or ever will be found. It's evidence proof in any case. It's a matter of faith.
Now, I happen to know, I'd be pretty sure at any rate, that there is no truth in the story of the Exodus, that it's a myth, it's a legend, but nonetheless, as an account of the origin of morality, it's imperfect in this respect. It assumes that, without divine revelation, people would think that society could be run with perjury, with murder, and with theft, not condemned. Well, this is obvious nonsense. So what we degrade ourselves by saying that we would not know what was innately of value to ourselves and to others, and in ourselves and others, if we didn't have either supernatural permission or supernatural injunction to believe in. And this is nonsense.
In your opinion, is a basis for any importance, any speciality, whether we call it rights or dignity? What makes any member of this species, you or I or anyone, special in a species that you say is a physical and biological accident and will inevitably be destroyed by the stars?
This is a very familiar false antithesis, and it's based on an unexamined presumption, which is that, it's best put, I think, by Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov, but without God, anything goes, right? You're awarded permission to do as you like, nothing really matters, the lives and rights of others are unimportant without God. But wouldn't it be, I won't say more true, but at least as true to say that with God, all atrocities and indifferences are also thinkable, sometimes mandated. Some religions order you to enslave people. The Old Testament repeatedly orders you to do it. They order you to mutilate the genitals of children. They order you to be terrified of the menstrual blood of women. They order you to inflict rape and exile and dispossession and torture on other people. You don't have to look far if you open your newspaper and go around the world, just do a quick tour d'horizon and see the ways in which the parties of God enjoin people to behave. In other words, I absolutely reject the grammar of your question, and I also very much resent, as I've told you before, gave you fair warning on this point, very much resent the smug religious assumption that anyone who can mention God has a moral edge on me. Not so. Go back and try again.
God, if he exists, does not owe me an explanation. It would be idle, it seems to me, and trivial to say, well, if you exist, why are you cruel? It's boring and self-pitying to talk like that. Pascal says, in his famous wager, well, what have you got to lose? If he does exist, you may find yourself tremendously fortunate if you make the right propitiations and if you agree with his existence. And if he doesn't, well, then you haven't lost a thing. Now, I regard that as another example of the essential immorality of religious preachment. That seems to me a hucksterish thing to be saying on Pascal's part. My reply to it would be, Bertrand Russell's reply to this, by the way, was if he was confronted with God on the day he died, what would he say? He said, "Oh Lord, you did not give us enough evidence." A bit dry. I think I would say, if I had my chance at Pascal's bat, I would say, well, if your reputation, sir, because it appears to be, sir, or Lord, is as I understand it to be, it might be that you would look more kindly upon someone who would not pretend to believe you in the hope of a reward or the fear of a punishment, someone who would rather try and lead an ethical life without that bribe, without that inducement, and that I might in that way perhaps earn the credit of this very dubious character. But you see, even to talk like this is surely to make ourselves realize that no grown-up can really allow themselves to think this way. We are responsible ourselves for how we treat others. We are responsible ourselves for human solidarity, and we will suffer when those solidarities break down. And we have a great interest as well as a great need to keep human dignity and decency alive for its own sake. Not because we fear heaven, not because we fear hell or wish for heaven or desire any of these other sorts of primitive fear or inducement.
But there's a specific Christian school called premillennial dispensationalism, and it's not the only one, that says, who cares about the environment, who cares about the planet, who minds about all this? Jesus is coming back, he's coming back real soon, you're wasting your time with conservation measures. And the mutatis mutandis, that would be just as true of any other calamity, that if you believed in God, you could be as indifferent to it as you wished. Who said the following about the prospect of a nuclear holocaust, a nuclear extermination of humanity? Who said this about it? The worst it could do would be to move people more rapidly rather than less into a state of futurity to which they're destined in any case.
Wasn't me.
No, it was the Archbishop of Canterbury when there were first protests against Britain testing a nuclear weapon in the atmosphere. It was an ex cathedra statement by the Archbishop. It's a statement that's perfectly congruent with the Christian faith. I sure don't see myself visiting the family of someone who's just lost a child and telling them that God wants it that way, and then thinking I'm morally superior for doing that. I sure won't do that. You're quite right. And you're wrong about Jesus of Nazareth, Dinesh, it seems to me. There is no hell in the Old Testament. Strange but true. At least not in any of the canonical books. God may order a lot of genocide and enslavement and torture and rape and dispossession, but once all these people have been destroyed and had their lives and their civilizations obliterated and the earth has covered them, that's it. There's no punishment of the dead. For infinite torture, for torture that goes on forever, you have to go to the Nazarene, who says that those who don't accept his gentle and meek and mild preachments can depart into everlasting fire. Again, something in me resists being spoken to in that tone of voice. The scientific method is to be always in doubt and to be always willing to test your own assumptions against new evidence. But that's completely different from the affirmation of faith. The affirmation of faith is a presupposition. I used to sit and listen to it being said, in order to believe you must have faith in order to believe. There was nothing you could tell me in advance that if I could show it to you would destroy your faith. It's evidence proof in that case. You couldn't have a bigger discrepancy between two ways of looking at the world than the religious and the scientific one.